And then, yeah, please feel free to chat to Howard Diesel on LinkedIn, and the presentation deck will be available at the end of the series. So it'll be at the end of July.
Okay, Debs, thank you very much. Thanks for that intro. So just like to introduce you to this webinar series. Both of us are sitting in Saudi, in Riyadh, and we had the great privilege of meeting Ahmed the other day. We had a fantastic cup of coffee. Thanks, Ahmed, for the coffee. It was great. We appreciate it. Nice to see the data management community in Saudi. And this discussion, or this month, we are going to be taking you through almost the journey that we're walking through as we're introducing what we refer to as data value-driven management. We are setting up policies and procedures and strategy and that within one of the ministries. We have to be careful here in terms of sharing confidential information and that, but it's a lot of the learning that we are going through and working with the customer. So let's be careful if we mention the wrong words, but we shouldn't. Okay, so the idea is we will go through, similar to the others, we will explain the essential concepts, and then we will deal with the data manager, which is the data management role. And JG and I will be swapping backwards and forwards. JG is specializing at the moment in the role of data value realization. It was, and I need to compliment the NDMO in Saudi. They introduced it into the domain, into the regulations, realizing value. I think it was a tremendous input and adjustment. It's sort of something that's always asked when you do DMBOK training, and there's that one little statement in data governance, and that's responsible for realizing data value. And lots of people ask, how do we do it, and stuff like that. Now, the NDMO in Saudi have actually introduced the framework, and we're having to build out these use cases, and we're running through a practical set of use cases, and we hope to give you some feedback. Of course, we can't share details, but we're actually going through the process of doing this, and hopefully we can share some of this with you. Okay. Please, again, interrupt if you would like to. I think it's helpful. We do have a lot of slides. Unfortunately, I think I suffer from the overslide disease, but we feel they're important, and we hopefully we can get through them. All right. So essential concepts. So what is essential about data value-driven management? And we've taken a long time to derive this phrase that we talk about it. Lots of people know about being data-driven, and that relates to a state of an organization. Some organizations are data disabled because they don't trust the data, and everybody wants to get to data-driven. And an outcome of the NDMO is that the entities or the ministerial entities are data-driven, which is fantastic. To have that unifying vision in a country is quite something, and it's lovely to see the commitment to getting there. Certainly not easy, and what we talk about is how do we get there? Okay, so let's start off, which we believe is really important, and it's what I refer to as the principle of the path. It's not actually me. I actually found this guy by the name of Andy Stanley. He presented it. And I like the way he said, we are here, how to get from where you are to where you want to be. And I've found so many cases that I go into an organization and everybody's doing something. Everybody's really busy. They're either doing data governance, or they're doing BI development, or they're doing database operations, data development, or they're doing data quality. And we ask, how do we string all of this together to achieve the valuable outcome we need to drive our business? What is the thing that drives it? How do we set the direction? Now, I spent quite a bit of time doing maturity assessments and getting quite despondent that things are in a mess. And a lot of times when I see a mess or a low maturity rating of 1 or 2, then a lot of times we can say, guys, you haven't set the direction of where you're going. You haven't defined what your path is and set the direction. Okay. Thanks, Mark. So, okay, so the principles of the path, the nice thing about a principle is that it gets applied to you. You don't apply it, okay? Wherever you go, whether it's in life, if you make some of the wrong decisions and you get into the wrong direction, sometimes you can keep on going there, and the next minute you turn around and say, how did I get you? Well, it's one set of incorrect or wrong decisions, and you land up in a place that you don't want to be. It's a very sticky principle. It sticks to all of us. I'd love to know anybody that doesn't have this principle applied to them. And the worst thing about it is it's possibly that you are lost and you don't know that you lost. And probably the first time when you do a maturity assessment, and sometimes when you present it to the CEOs, they look at this and say, "Oh, this doesn't sound good. We may be lost." Unfortunately, what happens is sometimes we present it and the interpretation is we looking for ways of generating money or revenue, and now they must employ us to get it fixed. But a lot of the times you can't fix it. It's not like a car engine where if you blow a gasket, you can take it into the mechanics and get them to replace the gasket. You turn it on after that, and it's fixed. Whereas if you've been going the wrong direction, the only way you fix it is to reverse the direction and start walking in the path that you need to be. You can't fix it overnight. It's going to take a long time. Then we get involved with cultural issues and challenges like that to undo what you were doing and now reinstituting the correct path. Okay. If you realize the problem and don't change direction, again, you're not going to fix it. You're just going to keep on going. And one of the comments that Andy Stanley made is he said, you may be different, you may be unique, but the problems that you experience are not unique. And the way in which you get to those challenges are also not unique, and we find the same thing with data management. Okay, so this is an important thing. And then the next one is to say, to put the new direction into practice, you need to build and create the habit, right? So we need to build this data management house, and we need to build the direction. And one of the things I always hear about the DMBOK is to say, yes, I've got this lovely wheel, but what does it mean? Where do I start? Where do I finish? How do I go forward? What steps do I put in place? And that's where lots of people battle to implement the DMBOK. Fantastic principles, but how do I go about it? How do I set myself apart? And hopefully we feel that we can present one of these things to you. But what we are all about, and I think all of us are there, the whole thing about data management and doing this is to deliver value to the business. Now, the business derive those benefits from its data assets, and there are almost two directions that we see here. One is the direction of the data asset that gets better and better and better, and we've all heard about the DIGWA, right, which is data, information, knowledge, and wisdom. Now, that's almost per asset. Now, the next one that we don't think about a lot is the direction of the data management of the data asset. Now, how do we get all of these knowledge areas to go in the same direction and to be done at the right time and to be applied to our improvement of the data assets? Or are we, as individual areas, just trying to fix this problem and trying like crazy to get it right? So just as a quick description, in terms of the data asset direction, this is what we refer to. We all, hopefully by now, we understand the DIGWA. And this is a simple example. So can you see we're going data, information, knowledge, and wisdom? I'm sure you've seen it in the DMBOK. Data is the initial starting point. And when I say that, that's not entirely true, because business understanding or business processes collect information, and then we build databases that keep the data that represent the information. So you'll then go information, data, information, knowledge, and wisdom. So truth be told, it starts at information, and we have to piece it back together again. But let's not be too pedantic about that. So here's a sample data value chain that I wanted JG just to talk to. This is something that he uses in his healthcare experiences. JG, would you like to?
Yeah, cool. Thanks, Howard. So what this data value chain sample does is it aims to illustrate the increase of value, as in the direction of the data asset increasing in value, both within each of the different data elements, but trying to illustrate how when you string data elements together into a data value chain, you get an incremental increase in value. So how that's depicted here is within each of these disciplines: master data, operational, detail, episode of care within healthcare, or case profiles. There are opportunities to walk the DICWA process within each one of those. But when you string them all together, you increase value kind of from left to right. So just as an example, one that we can maybe all relate to is, this is a healthcare example. And just imagine the following, is that there is this desire to consider healthcare not with respect to individual engagements between a doctor and a patient, but actually with respect to the way in which an episode of care is handled. So I'm going to use a simple an example that we did on behalf of some of the hospitals. Imagine you wanting to determine whether the cataract procedure, replacing the lens of an eye, the downstream impact of a cataract procedure, whether was there an impact from the different lenses that we use. So one of the challenges you face is the legislation, the inconsistency of which the applying legislation to the importation of different intraocular lenses. So this was, is there a correlation between those lenses that have gone through the right procedures and those that haven't in terms of the outcome of the patient? So that's the business problem to be solved. And how did one go about doing that? Is you needed to use the master data with respect to patients, the doctor performing the procedure, the theater where it happened, and the procedure itself. Those then get collated and aggregated into the actual operation, where you now have different, different drugs and different medical devices that we use as part of that procedure. And then you watch the episode of care over time. So, and what's really nice about a cataract is it's a single procedure, and it should be successfully performed. And then there's a very distinct series and sequence of procedures, bottom left under master data, that is procedurally driven. What was interesting, and maybe just a side note, is some doctors were not capturing the record to differentiate between left eye and right eye. So you had the same patient looking like there was an anomaly, but then all of a sudden you realized that they weren't actually using the coding correctly, left eye, right eye. So that data needed to be excluded. You watch the episode of care, and then the case profiles came through, and you start to see the benchmarking in terms of what's typical for a normal intraocular lens and where were the outliers. And interestingly enough, this particular analysis ended with a relatively pointed discussion to one of the suppliers who wasn't necessarily, it wasn't an accusational discussion. It was a curious discussion between the entities responsible for quality standards and what was actually happening. So a really empowered discussion by doing that. So there was value up and down. So the example I said, left, right eye, that was something depicted in the actual procedure code. So the DICWA was improved under master data vertically, and then horizontally, you got an episode of care. So that's pretty much in terms of an example of how the data value chain adds value to the direction of the asset, adds value both vertically and horizontally. Thanks, Howard.
Thanks. And then Karen had a question. So each pillar a data asset? And this we actually realized this during this week is that if we don't get our glossary of terms right, we run into all sorts of problems. Now, if you're a product person that's been developing lots of products, you would understand it's the product that generates revenue, not the individual components of the product. Okay. Now, in this case, the product is optimal care. That's the product that will make you money, and that's the valuation that you get. So you can get revenue from optimal care. You would not get revenue from a patient. Okay. And so together, this data gives you the ability to build a data product and charge people the revenue on the data product. Now, can you go down to each element or entity in the data product and say, how much did you add value? Probably not, because it's not giving you the answers that solve the work for the person buying the data product. Or does that answer your question?
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, it does in a sense. I just want to make sure. So if we look at master data, so obviously that is an entity of your product.
Yes, correct.
Is the
It's
product.
an entity of the product that contains several entities.
Okay, the operation side is then physical when you go do the operation, and then you do the analysis, and then the case profiling. Is that more?
No, that's sort of that case profile, and I'm sure JT can explain. That's when you really get your valuable insights going back to the doctors, to the businesses that run operational theaters. That's when you start being able to benchmark and compare and understand good procedures or things like that. When you can start valuing whether the operation was successful or not. Now, there are some challenges that come into an ethical side because sometimes doctors fix bad mistakes, and so who caused that? That's where the next set of challenging comes in.
Thank you.
Okay, great. So it is important to assess this as a whole, and then what is the product that you deliver to your customer? You'll typically not deliver patients. The data, or doctor data, you're going to deliver something that answers the questions. That's the data product. That's where you get the data value realization. Okay, so we've spoken about data asset direction. This is the hard one, the data management direction. And it would be really nice if anyone would have come up with an answer saying, well, this is how we build and we string all of our knowledge areas together. And what I'm just trying to show you here is that it's relatively easy to come up with a recipe for doing one knowledge area. Master data, data governance, we see these recipes. How do you do master data? But how do we do all of it together? How do we synchronize them all together? And that's where the challenges come in, especially when sometimes when you look at regulations and they number the domains from 1 to 14, does that mean we do number 1 first, number 2, number 3, number 4? Well, unfortunately, it doesn't always work like that because the direction hasn't been set appropriately, or the path hasn't been set. Not the path.
Direction, the other path.
Okay, so I wanted to just have a quick jump around here in terms of what's important, and I know I'm going to have to go quickly. This is, I'm sure, Ahmed, you would recognize this. This is part of and Veronica would know, this is part of the DMBOK. Right in the beginning, they got all these interesting slides, and a lot of the time people ask, what is this all about? Why do we have these things here? Why are we trying to understand a strategic alignment model? And I need to be honest, is that I really didn't pay attention to this a lot until about December of last year, when I got frustrated with myself, when I couldn't really explain all of these different elements, strategy, operations, info. What do they mean by alignment? What was this thing? And then I started to dig a lot deeper. Now, I could certainly explain this one, which was taking the business, then going to the information, and then going to the IT. This was almost the sequence that we had. And then doing it at a strategy level, at a tactical level, and operations, business execution, data management, doing data modeling, doing BI, lifecycle type stuff. I could understand that breakdown, but I wasn't sure what this alignment meant. And so I spent some time, and I was blown away by this diagram and a few elements over here that said, when you deal with businesses and you're a business architect, these are the areas that you're going to be focusing on, the strategy and the organizational infrastructure. Fantastic. Now I want to automate. Now what I'm going to be doing is getting these processes automating. So I'm going to bring in applications, data management, architecture skills, and I'm going to get some automation. But when I do this, I need to constantly align back to the scope, back to the value proposition. I need to keep myself in sync. So what happens after a while when it's a mess, we go to build our data and IT strategy, and nowadays they're calling it a digital strategy. Okay, so we're needing to keep all of these blocks in line and cross-validating each other. And I was completely unaware of the fact that there's quite a bit to this. And there's actually almost a maturity assessment on how well is your data strategy aligned to your digital strategy, which is aligned to your business strategy. And lots of times I find when I go and look at a data strategy, it's dealt with all on its own. And it's like, well, where's the business input to this? And it looks more like a data management strategy because it's dealing with all of the technology. So nice ways to look at your alignment maturity and to see how you put all this together. And one of the things we really read again and going through this process is, as you go through these upliftments of business, you tend to focus on initially getting the efficiency right, getting the processes automated, not having lots of different processes, not achieving what they need to. When they're there, you have to ask yourself the question, well, we're doing these processes, but are they effective? And when they're there and we get new things like smart cities, industrial cities, and all sorts of other stuff, we then have to transform the business, and that's where our digital transformation comes in. And so we're increasing these levels of innovation. So support, improve, innovate. And one of the things that we find critically important is no longer must we be sitting with 250-page data strategy documents that take 6 months to deliver and no one reads them. We need this continuous strategy and planning. So how do we bring continuous strategy and planning into the game, and how do we converge business, IT, and data to be the one element? Okay, this is what we're after. This is what we should be doing. So if you're writing a strategy once every 3 years, you certainly haven't got a transformation process that's happening in here. Corin, I'll send you some of the data, but if you do look at strategic alignment model, there's lots of papers that take you through this transformation and take you through the journey. So what we've come up with is, when we build our data strategy, when we build the direction for our data management, we need to be ensuring that we're getting vertical alignment, and then we need to ensure that we're getting horizontal alignment, right? So data management domains and areas should be following and complementing each other as we go along. And we're trying to achieve this continuous data strategy with baked-in data convergence. We're trying to make sure that every product that we release has data baked in and is delivering value. And then we also get some of these challenges along the way with good communication, good partnerships between business and data and IT, good level of skills. But we walk this hierarchy. So we introducing this case idea of having use cases that string our data management strategy together, that bring our data together, that bring digital together, and bring business together, and at the same time allow us to string our knowledge areas together. And this one over here is just an Excel that we use to keep the grain of a use case, and we go all the way through our sequence. We go through the sequence of steps, and that helps a lot. For example, if you want to build an understanding of data quality, critical data elements, what do you base it on? Well, a lot of times it's based on analytics, ratios, key ratios in BI. So first of all, understand your analytical that you're trying to do, and then your key data elements come out of it. So here's an example of a use case register that we put together. The ones in the blue, a very exciting thing with new Industry 4.0. So we put together a use case of the work that's possible within an organization. And then we start applying a group of use cases together. Every single use case should be linked up the path to say, where have you come from? What are you doing? And then every single domain should be saying, what do they contribute to this use case? So for example, data architecture should be contributing an ontology from the enterprise nomenclature, all the elements in there. They should be saying, right, this data product that's made up of patients or customers, this is the domain or the subject area that we're working in, right? So we're uplifting that area and we're working on that area of data. And so we go through open data, and we've now we've built the sequence and we're trying to apply it. Okay, then I'm going to just hand over to JG to describe how we have this playbook for data value driven management.
Cool, thanks, Howard. So one of the key points here is the construct of growing the valued data asset. So if we make the assumption that a data product is something where you in an iterative manner, you continue to add value to that product through an incremental process. And this is a mechanism to incrementally add value to that data product. And so you can imagine that you can be aspirational with a minimum viable product, get it out quickly and iterate through. And so how does one do that? And we're busy as part of this project preparing the data value driven management playbook. And that word data value is really key because not all data elements have the same value. And it's really important to recognize which ones are valuable and then escalate or prioritize those elements over the others. So what this schematic looks to do is to say, start with the ideation process with business and conduct that in such a way that you get use cases. And once you've got your use case, this DVR process, which is data value realization, it's what Howard started the discussion with. This is a key requirement for of this particular compliance set. We don't see it in the DMBOK body of knowledge, within the DM body of knowledge. I'm not sure that it's not long before we see it. This is such a powerful way of orchestrating the sequence of delivering work. So your use case data value realization triggers the value chain to create your valued data products in an iterative way. Simply done. You go through a DVR process, data value realization. It's at its core looks to value the data product within the eyes of the business. You do that within the construct of the feasibility study that comes through a data management maturity assessment. Those two items prioritize the use cases, and then each use case in its incremental format adds to the data strategy, augments the oversight functions. Remember, oversight has practice establishment, operating model, policies and procedures, and so on. But it just adds to it in an incremental way in order to support that use case. And then you punch through and you execute by domain, where your data cataloging, your quality, and so on, and you end up with a use case, your use case. If you've got several needed to implement at the same time, you use different techniques to do that. Key thing is that you then retro afterwards, and there the question that you ask when you're retroing is, how do we increase the DICWA level? And then sometimes you get to partner with business because you see some gaps having iterated so quickly. Bottom line is, key thing is growing the valued asset quickly and repeatedly. And we think this DVR in conjunction with the execution by domain is a very valid way of doing that. Thanks, Tom.
And what's important here, we use the train importantly. So almost the number of use cases that you choose will depend on your execution capability. Right? How many use cases can we run in parallel? And so that's where you've got to start. Be careful of, don't choose 100 use cases here and then you spend 5 months building a data strategy. And then you can only execute on one. Okay, so there's some practicalities in terms of getting all of that right.
So what is key here is the differentiation between the direction of the business, the data assets, and the data asset management program. And here, I just want to draw your attention to the middle item within this value realization continuum. We've seen this several times. Right at the top is we've got the DICWA increase moving left to right, but there you have the business's aspiration to go from data disabled to enabled to led to driven. And so the data driven is a business aspiration. But what we're seeing here is these use cases are then are data led. And so we've got this convergence of what we're looking to do with the data and what the business is looking to do. Cool. So it's a subtle differentiation, but we're seeing it as quite pivotal, where we're saying that data value driven or DVD is not. It's not the same as data-driven. Data-driven is the business's aspirations, the direction the business is going, and it informs the data assets. What we're seeing with this kind of highly incremental generation of a data strategy and all the corresponding data elements that fulfill that strategy is it's more in line with data-led. It focuses on the value chain, and it helps determine which data management processes should be performed to support and enhance the value of data. And why we think this is so powerful is how it cannot be that data management is the realm of enterprise companies with very long processes, very expensive. It means that we're forgetting the SMEs and the startups. And we would argue that an SME and a startup need a data strategy, agile data strategy, even more than some of these big enterprises. And so we're seeing that when you sequence the knowledge areas in a way that is pragmatic, practical, use case orientated, all of a sudden it allows these data management processes to become accessible to SMEs and startups.
Great. So that was just that side of it. Then if we go to, this is just an image of the NDMO, the regulations that have been introduced into Saudi. We've basically spoken about the governance oversight. And then we use the data value realization to drive value chain, value use cases that come out. And we almost go through the life cycle per use case. Okay, so we choose the use cases and we go through that life cycle. Of course, you're always applying the fundamental, the foundational activities, cataloging, metadata, quality, classification, they are applied to every single use case. But then we take each use case, each asset through the data lifecycle, plan, enable, create, use and enhance and dispose. So we then repeat it in multiple iterations. Okay, now what led us to some of this thinking was in going through all of these compliance issues, you start to connect the dots. And it's only when you have to go through a compliance of every single domain when you connect the dots properly. We started seeing, right, here we've got building a data strategy for data governance. Here we've got data value realization. And then we see, oh shit, we've got requirements that we must look at from the business point of view. There are business requirements, these are the problems. And when we look at problems, they're either cost-saving problems or opportunities of generating revenue. There we get our use cases. And then when we go across into business intelligence, now we've got all the use case detailing, all of these ideas on how to go through these use cases and drive the right direction. So that's where we see BIA or business BI and analytics need the guardrails, need the direction. You're doing analytics to deliver on the use cases for cost reduction or revenue generating to deliver on the strategy. And all this prioritization should be falling out of this process. Now, that was almost what I had there was the summary diagram of trying to achieve data-driven, but then we're connecting all of this path together. So hopefully we're seeing that. Can you see how I'm laying out the specifications? But what you realize quickly is you go data governance, open data, data cataloging, BI, reference data, master data, and then you start jumping backwards and forwards. So there's no sequential thing, which is what we all know. The wheel can't give us a sequence, but the value realization helps us drive and put all of this direction in place. Okay, so now those are what we believe to be the essential concepts. I don't know if anyone would like to pause us and ask anything about data value before we show you how the data management manager needs to implement this within an organization. Are there any questions? I'm sure you would have put your hand up, but just giving a break and maybe to catch my breath and have some water. Any questions before we progress? Mark?
Yeah, Howard, that was an incredibly busy slide, your last slide before this one. Is this the next section going to, is the next section going to deep dive into that?
So just to share with you is the reason why it's so busy is that we had to plot out a path on how to achieve compliance across all of the domains. So this is basically a way of getting through what we refer to as a P1 deliverable, what phases we can break them up, and how can we structure our specifications. So it was just trying to show the business and the team that we're on there is a sequence of steps. If you think about it, there's a sequence of steps that you can implement these specifications. So it would take a while. I think it would take like 2-3 days to show you all the specifications. It's really interesting. So I'd love to do that with you, Mark, but it's just trying to show you that these things are all connected and they need a steering path and they need a guidance.
Sounds like a topic for a future talk.
Yeah, it does. So at a very high level, you can see here, it's really, we focus on strategy and plan, get the compliance done with it, and understand your policies and procedures, and then build your awareness and performance. And we deliver all of these documents in this way, but we're also doing it use case by use case. We achieving this compliance use case by use case.
Love it. Thank you.
All righty. Thanks, Mark. Okay, now I'll hand over to JG.
Cool, thanks, Howard. So what we're seeing is that the best way to execute on a data value realization type process is through the structure of a DMO. And so
maybe everyone doesn't understand the DMO.
Oh, okay. So a DMO just being a data management office.
Oh.
And the way we've tried to simplify it for the party, the client is actually the DMO, the data management office, and they're saying, how do I proceed? What do I do? And the way we've summarized their kind of mission in a line is your job is to catalog and grow the data assets within your business. You've got to know where they are, you've got to give them a name, and you've got to grow them. Those are the 3 things you need to do. And so the kind of hurdles that we're starting to see is that this is a greenfield DMO in an existing business. And so the change management, the adoption of the DMO in this environment has actually been quite hard. And so that's one of the key aspects of, that was one of the key hurdles to overcome is they almost need a ticket to the table. They
can't just sit at the table. They can't come in and operate at the table.
Not yet. They almost need to buy their right. They need to buy a ticket to the table. They're sometimes viewed as a handbrake. They're not. The business doesn't really know what they do, so they just think that it's compliance and audit. And the data management office will never, in terms of sourcing, you have to consider federated or do the resources live in departments, or are they federated? Are they federated in departments, or are they collected within the central underneath the DMO? So these are all questions that they're grappling with, and at the same time needing to deliver a massive delivery to national regulations. And so what we're going to do over the next 4 weeks is we're going to take you through the different roles. Today is the data management, manager. And these are, you can think of, this is the challenge that this person faces right now is the DMO, the data management office, recently established and has to prove its value. That's the first point. Second point is there's a high level of skepticism, and we've actually seen it. We've seen this poor we've seen the poor managers sit in a workshop and have to almost tell the business what this entity does, and it's been around for 6 or 7 months.
And one of the worst comments I heard, which from a change management point of view, when we were talking to one of the business entities, the one guy said jokingly, "Should I get my lawyer?" They were talking about privacy and also the compliance issues, and he said, "Do I need to get a lawyer before I answer this question?" So of course they're feeling very nervous and they're not sure what this entity is there to do.
And so immediately everybody assumes compliance, except there's a very ambitious business strategy that is focused on value to partners. This the 3rd bullet point. The 4th bullet point is there's a very ambitious digital strategy that forces this client to embrace and leverage Industry 4.0 drivers. and these are sometimes, fog computing, edge adoption, just collecting data sources that are incredibly almost futuristic, but very governed, very prevalent in the data strategy document. And so those are the two middle challenges. And then the last one is there was an initial data assessment, a maturity assessment done towards the beginning of the year, and the scoring was quite low. So it gave us a good sense that this is not a mature organization, but it really needs to deliver. So how does one do that? How do you make that person, enable the person to go front foot and really guide? And so how, next slide, thanks. So there are choices. There are possible plays. So that construct of a playbook, we'll be talking about that a lot in the next 3 weeks. So when looking at the DMO, they have 4 possible plays, one of which is disastrous, and we shouldn't do that, and that's the bottom left, the white one. But if we look at the axes here, if you were to just focus on the business value drivers, it would be a really good thing. But if you just focused on those without taking into account the data management, so what does that mean? If your direction was purely business value driver, but at the cost of spending time with on data management, you would lead with value, but you quickly find that you don't have the processes and policies and procedures to scale. If you took the other track, which is you focused on data management, you led with compliance, what the problem with that is the business would see you as audit and not bring any of their value cases, and quickly would kind of lead quickly to a low impact.
Exclusion. Also, they don't want to get involved.
Don't want to get involved. So with a 2x2 matrix, we dress up the one that we want, and that's highlighted on the top right. It says, is there a way, is it possible to embrace both and thereby be able to take the DMO from compliance to a competitive advantage and governed within the data value driven framework? And the only way we've seen so far, and we might come up with more in the next 3 weeks as we bring the use case to you, the case study to you, is you need to do a little bit of both fast. And so it's all about how do we increment both business value drivers and data management focus against a use case, which you deliver, you retro and you repeat, rinse and repeat on the retro. And so here you're seeing a slightly more detailed rendition of the data value-driven management playbook. And here, what we've introduced is the fact that it is governed and managed and owned and eat, sleep, and drink by the DMO. And so here what we see is there's the vertical alignment from the business on the left-hand side through the ideation process. And there's the horizontal alignment on the right-hand side through the execution by domain. And that gives you the kind of axes of the diagram of the 2x2 matrix that we've just looked at. And then in between, you bring in this DVR process coupled with the maturity assessment, you apply that per use case, you move that through the data strategy, which is responsible for giving you your SWOT, your sequencing. You apply those rows. You see the BC, the BC stands for business capability. Are you going to build a business capability? Are you going, is your delivery of value through the construct of efficiencies, as in business process optimization? Or have you got enough information and insights and guidance from your business to come up with a revenue generating use case? So your use cases quickly come out in 3 types: business capability, business process optimization, or revenue generation. And choosing well, you can then bring them down to an action plan roadmap. And that's what you then use to drive your oversight operating model and practice, but just enough to get the use case through, knowing that you're going to do a use case retro, an increment, come back and loop around. And Howard, maybe you could just help us with, if we looked at this through the eyes of a CDO, recognizing that a CDO executes through their DMOs.
Yeah.
We think that a CDO, you could set a CDO up for victory time-wise.
Yeah, and I think it's always important. You'll see that all over the place. The other day I was quite keen to understand what this first 100 days is all about. But certainly I went on a course with Carolyn Carruthers and Peter Jackson, and they really stressed as CDOs or people that want to become CDOs, you've got 100 days to prove value, right? Now, you can't take 6 months, you can't take 8 months or 2 years to prove value. You probably find that people are going to start asking questions, well, why did we bring this guy on and what's happening to us? So there's a big drive for the CDO to show a change in 100 days. Okay, and this is the sort of time frame we put together. We've done these use cases within the 2 weeks. We've got a set of use cases. We've got 17. We then now focusing on the DVR step. We believe that we should be more than past our way over 3 weeks. Now the actual data strategy becomes really light. From a point of view, is most of the feasibility studies that have been done before that. You're now really coming in to say we've got a group of 5 use cases. Let's do a SWOT analysis. I'm sure you guys know the fact that ONT, which is opportunity and threats, are always external. So, and an opportunity relates to revenue. Where can we get revenue? Where can we get customers to? What problems can we solve with the customers, and where can we generate revenue? And so this was a nice breakdown of what we're seeing coming out is that when we look at our weaknesses, a lot of times when I built a data strategy, I'd spend time with the business understanding the weaknesses, but it was all over the place. And I never had a way of clearly describing what those weaknesses are. And really they relate to the fact of ineffective, inefficient business process. Those are the two. Those are the weaknesses. So when you see a use case that's been put forward on the table to drive BPO, you know that's a weakness thing. And so we can bring these two together and iterate. So we're talking about a week to get our strategy. This is so great in terms of achieving that continuous strategy development. And now we've got 10 weeks to actually get the deliverable out. And the nice thing about going through this framework, a lot of this upfront thinking of what analytics are you going to do? What's your value proposition to the customer? What does the data product need to look like? A lot of these discussions have been done up front before you start with the execution. So we made it on time. Oh. but I'm hoping we haven't left too many people behind. But happy to now almost try to answer questions and see what you guys think about it, how you're feeling. And what do you think about setting a direction and building a direction for your data management? Any questions, or have we overloaded everyone with?
Maybe, Howard, whilst people are thinking of some of the questions, maybe just an anecdotal observation from that workshop process. So just the setting is the person responsible for the DMO is sitting in the meeting. We've convened a whole lot of business workshops through each of the departments. And this department in particular was business development. These are the guys with which we were hoping to flush out a revenue use case.
Yeah, revenue.
And from that meeting, I was inspired by, there was a time in that meeting where everybody stopped speaking to us as the consultants in the room, and they started speaking to each other. And so the room set up, big table, and everybody was listening to us. And then there was this magic moment where they stopped and they started listening to each other. And the DMO, the person managing the data management office, was having a direct discussion with business about how some of the data elements could become more valuable. And it's almost as if we weren't in the room. And when we asked the DMO manager to just reflect on the week, that moment, this person reflected back on to say that hadn't happened in the 7 months that this person had been, taking on this role. And so it was encouraging that the DMO is saying, oh my word, this is how the business wants to speak to me, and they do.
Yeah.
And they did. And the next thing, we had a plethora of use cases coming out. But yeah, how so just practically the change management of these kind of processes in these DMO processes, and the change management, it's real. And I think if the DMO had started with just like, hi everybody, we need to comply, I don't know whether this person would have elicited those comments from business. That would I don't know, but I don't think so.
Okay. Thanks, Jake. Any comments? How do you guys feel? I mean, if we look at the way the DMBOK or these things are implemented in your business, is there a direction in which they go in? Are you aware of a direction? Is this something that you guys have thought about, or any comments?
I mean, from my side, looking at this and listening to this presentation is very interesting, because coming from the healthcare, I mean, we have lots of data, and building that use cases to focus the direction, I think it's a paramount, because I mean, while we have a lot of data, there's a lot of issues with that data in terms of quality, in terms of the governance, and how it's stored and how it's accessed. It's a big issue, and I guess that's related to the discussion when I had with Dr. Ibrahim about how we can go about building the data management office in our company. And I remember when we were taking the course, we were talking with the doctors about, okay, we're going to build a data strategy, and we need to formulate that and make sure that we have the right strategy. And the doctor jumped in and said, look, we don't have time. I have data coming from my hospitals, and I need to analyze it. So while you guys do your mumble jumble over there about strategy and all of that, okay, I mean, we need to collect data and look at it. I think that's yeah, that's really interesting. However, looking at the left side of this slide, when you're talking about the ideation, so who's going to be sitting on that table talking about talking about the direction or the use cases that they want to build? Who should be part of the people who are sitting on that table?
So, Ahmed, the way we approached it was that we went through the organogram. We fortunately, the DMO we had primed the DMO before that we could have some interviews. Interestingly enough, we spoke on the Monday, and Wednesday we had them in a table talking to us, and we focused on the business departments and went through the business departments. Where we found some downstream challenges were, for example, we didn't have the people that put together the digital strategy to help us with some of their use cases. And we were quickly playing catch up to say, okay, what are the use cases from the digital?
Hello?
And we got into all sorts of challenges with different terminologies. So, for example, the digital strategy spoke about A, the business was speaking about B, and we weren't connecting. And in one case where I said, whilst I was trying to play catch up, I said, but what about this? There's this digital strategy use case that's saying that they want some dispute resolution, and she, who was running the marketing, said, I don't know. and so it was about her channel and about her people, the way they were interacting, but she wasn't sure where that was coming from. So we should have the people that are responsible for that business and digital strategy in a lot of these sessions, plus the business, of course. And so it should typically be driven by business needs. And that's, again, what our data strategy should be focusing on. Where is the challenges and opportunities that we have in building a data strategy? And in my history, I always got lots and lots and lots and lots of challenges and weaknesses and problems, and I got very few opportunities. And when you change this around, you get a lot more opportunities coming along and say, oh, we could possibly make money here, or this data could be used to drive money. And so we found that very valuable in starting in that area.
Thank you.
Maybe Ahmed, just an anecdotal observation was linking this to change management. When it came to scheduling these workshops, there was a time where we said, should each division have its own workshop, or do you think that there will be synergies and collaboration between the business divisions? And then, the trade-off between the synergies and collaboration, and then one of them not being heard, that was the dilemma.
Right.
And what was interesting is the DMO manager made the call. We asked for, and it turned out to be an excellent call. That the synergies that happened between businesses, they started to realize why they were there, was useful. So there's contextual information that we as data specialists might not have, that the DMO does have. And so if you don't have a DMO, you've got to find that person who knows how to set that workshop up to get the most out of the discussion, and it was an energized discussion. I think that's the best way I can describe it. So no, great question. Thanks, Ahmed.
Any other questions? Or are people finding it helpful?
Silly question, Howard, just please reiterate your collaborator there, your partner in crime that you're sitting with. Who's that guy?
It's JG.
Thank you.
Hi there, Mark.
Hi. I've seen you.
JG did that. JG did the presentation on ESG, on the sustainability.
Yeah.
Sustainability,
Yeah.
Of the semantic vocabulary.
Yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't connect the dots, and I struggled. I needed more data. Thank you.
Yes. Divakar.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. My question is regarding this. I mean, this is going to the future of 4.0. But as of now, I did not find this kind of department or any sub department inside any domains, like inside the IT or data analytics or any domains. I did not find this kind of profile or this kind of kind of work who's taken care by this kind of strategical work for data management official kind of thing. So this is going to be the future enhancement on all corporate way, or how this are going to be implemented?
Okay, Divakar, maybe I can just confirm my understanding of your question with relationship to Industry 4.0.
Yes.
Are you asking, is this existing in the ministry at the moment? And are they applying it? Is that your question?
No. My question, like this, I mean, this departments for regarding this DMO and other things. I'm not finding this kind of department. As of now, we finding department like information technology or data and AI analytics department. So
I get your question now. Other terms that have been used in other companies, other countries, for example, in South Africa, we talk about EIM, which is Enterprise Information Management. Other people talk about the data management group. So there's different terms, and typically your CDO would head up this type of department that is responsible for ensuring proper management and value going back to the business. In our case, where we are at in terms of the DMO, is that the regulator, the NDMO, have established and set up a rule to say that all these ministries, to ensure that it's happening, must establish a DMO, the Data Management Office within their organization. So that term is localized, but it's very similar to when a CDO comes in, they would set up a data management office that controls what happens within that organization with respect to data. I'm hoping that answered your question.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Divakar. Great. Thanks, everybody. Lovely to talk to you again and chat again. Hope to see you next week. And different presentations, all different things. But thank you, everybody, for attending. and we'll see each other next week.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Take
Ahmed.
care.
Cheers.
Enjoy your holiday. Ahmed.
I'll
Yeah.
do my best.
Cheers, Ahmed.
Take care, guys. Thank you
Cheers.
so
Bye.
much. Cheers.
Bye. Cheers, Mark.
Bye. Thank you.
Cheers, Debbie.